good evening and welcome to Yada Yahowah Radio. I have a couple of items in the news, but first we had a really astute listener last week. Her name is Krista Matkins. I hope Krista's listening again. Her heading was blasphemy, and she said, "You a goat." So the program tonight is brought to you by You a Goat. And just in case you are wondering, it is possible for goats to blaspheme.
Blaspheme, yes.
Yeah. Bless her heart. Yeah, bless her heart. We did get news out of Indonesia. For anyone who has thought about going to Bali, which is, a pretty nice resort destination. There's a lot nicer, but it's not so bad. Or any one of the gazillions of islands. So, by the way, Concierge is auctioning off several hundred islands at a no-reserve auction this month in Indonesia. But you want to make certain that either you are celibate or that you are with your spouse, because it's a 6-month prison term now if any unwed couple has sex in Indonesia. And this not only includes Indonesian subjects, but also guests, foreigners.
Wow.
And I just thought that I'd bring that item to your attention, because they're making these decisions based upon the Islamic religion. And Muhammad was a sexual pervert. He was involved in multiple acts of pedophilia. He was not only a rapist on some occasions, but a serial rapist. Yes. And he had a harem, which means that obviously he had unmarried sex. But nonetheless, they are thinking they're doing their Lord a great service. Speaking of great services, I owe Obama an apology. I never thought I would have to say that, but I owe Obama Nation an apology. I had told our listeners that the problems in the Ukraine, this war that the United States is aiding and abetting in the Ukraine, bankrupting the world over, and pushing us toward the point where the dollar will no longer be the reserve currency of the world, which will bankrupt the country and put us into complete anarchy. That brilliant strategy was begun in the Obama era, when Obama, with the support of McCain and Lindsey Graham, decided to overthrow the properly elected government of the Ukraine through a series of riots, so that a pro-Western government would arise and that we could bribe them with the IMF to become part of Europe, as opposed to continuing a relationship with Russia. Turns out that plot was not born during the Obama administration. George W. Bush in 2006 didn't go to the Ukraine, met with the Ukrainians, and told him that his plan was for them to be part of NATO, and that if it brought war, that the U.S. would defend NATO, or defend the Ukraine. So the decision to arm the Ukraine and make them part of NATO, leading to this war that will end in all likelihood with a nuclear exchange, and will absolutely result in the United States losing its reserve currency status and bankrupt the country, began with none other than George W. Bush. 2006 is when we set this course. Kirk, I think you mentioned in the preamble to the show that that you've done the same thing Leah has done. Well, I've been doing this, been speaking out against this since 2013 is when I've been speaking out against the decisions that we have made relative to the Ukraine. That there are others now in academia to gather the same facts that I have, who recognize that the aggressor in the Ukraine is the United States, and that we brought this war on the world.
Yeah, even break it down to almost exactly how you did last week, which I thought was interesting. The Russian success, it says, if Russia succeeds, and then it goes on and shows a long, long way on why they will succeed. And the only thing we could do is nuke them because you can't. They're going to win.
Yes.
And they analyze why. And but make a long story short, they basically start off with explaining that if Russia succeeds, it'll lead to international and monetary system change through the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Eurasian Economic Union. And basically, it says we're going to drive them to that because they don't want to deal with the dollars. Iran is already helping them with drones. Russia, they've massed hundreds, almost 300,000 troops ready. They control just about everything that's important now, and you can't beat these people. I mean, they will take what they're going to take, and they'll control everything. But I'll send you the report in great detail.
Okay.
And you
it's nice to know that the United
States'
answer to all of this, to defuse the prospect of world war, is that this week we announced that we will be bringing a new strategic international bomber online. Instead of the B-2, which turned out to be the biggest boondoggle in the history of the universe. Looks great at flying over the Rose Parade and an occasional preview at air shows, but is otherwise a complete waste of money. I think they're in the range of about $500 million a piece. We have a new and improved B-2. It's called the B-21. Looks just like the B-2, but has fancier paint on the outside and updated avionics. And we announced that it was specifically designed as a threat to the Chinese. If nothing says peace, then and by the way, at about $500 million a piece, we are committed to building 200 of them. Gee, I hope that fancy paint lasts that long. All right, we're going to return to one of my favorite statements. I think it is exceedingly interesting. It's found in Hosea. We are covering the book of Hosea, for a number of programs here. We are nearing the midpoint of the second chapter of Hosea. And this is where we concluded our program this time last week. This statement is one that I don't think I've ever heard anyone make a point of prior to the Yada Yahowah series, and yet it is so essential to understanding our relationship with God. It reads, during, waba, and with and on. This specific day, and the context is Yahweh's return to reconcile his relationship with his people. During this specific day, it shall be, Haya. It will happen. This was written in the Call Perfect, which means it's going to happen during this finite period of time. Prophetically declares Nahum, Yahweh. He wrote his name out for us to read it, for us to pronounce it. Yahweh. You will invite, welcome, and meet with me as an individual. Qara, iysh, ani. Qara means to welcome, to meet, to invite, to summon, to greet, to read, and to recite. Qara is the basis of Mikra. Mikra is the 7 annual of festivals that Yahweh has invited us to attend each year that are directly related to our relationship and our salvation. So Yahweh says, during this specific day, it shall be, prophetically declares Yahweh, you will invite, welcome, and meet with me as an individual. And then you will never again call me Wa lo Qara la ani Beli, my Lord, ever again.
You're playing
ever again. So This is the day that Yahweh is returning to reconcile his relationship with Yisrael and Yehudah. It's an extraordinary event because the tribes of Yisrael have been declared lost since the Assyrian invasion in the around 700 something BCE, and since that time there has only been a Yehudah, no Yisrael, and Yahweh is saying that he is going to bring the remnant of Yisrael and the Yahudim, Jews, together and going to reconcile his relationship on, of course, the Day of Reconciliations in year 6000 Yah, which is October 2nd at sunset in 2033. And at that moment, Yahweh says, you're going to welcome me, you're going to meet with me as a person, as an individual, as an iysh. Then you will never again call me Bailey, my Lord. Now, the reason that this is really striking is that Judaism has made a religion out of ignoring and renouncing Yahweh's name. If you are a Yahud, you probably don't even know that your name is based upon Yahweh's name. You have probably never said Yahweh's name in your life. You've never read Yahweh's name, and yet his name is written 7,000 times in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Religious Jews removed it and replaced it with Adonai, which means my Lord, committing this very crime. And so if you're going to be among those who welcome Yahweh as an individual, as a person, as somebody that we can personally relate to, identify with, and enjoy his company, then you will do so under his name, Yahweh, which means there will be no Haredim, there will be no religious people present, because the religious people do not use his name. Now, this is also interesting because when you turn to books like Daniel and Ezekiel, both of which were written either in Babylon or they claim to have been written in Babylon, what you find is that in Daniel that Yahweh's name is seldom mentioned, and he's always presented as the Lord. In Ezekiel, Yahweh's name appears everywhere, but it's always introduced by my Lord, Yahweh. Any book that was written that way is not valid, because a prophet is going to speak in the manner that Yahweh wants, not in a manner that he finds irritating. What I learned in continuing to translate Ezekiel is that Ezekiel is the literal fulfillment of Yeshaya Isaiah 14. For those who do not know, the 14th chapter of Isaiah is devoted to a singular theme, and that is the presentation of Satan seeking to rise above the Most High, to be worshipped as if he were God, and all of this occurring in Babylon. And so Ezekiel is that book. When he describes the images of the God he is seeing, the God he is describing is Satan. And all of the statements in Ezekiel are inspired by Satan. Now, it's interesting that by the time you get to the 12th chapter of Ezekiel, the Lord, who claims to be Yahweh, and is anything but, is actually saying that if I say something, well, he's saying of all the prophecy that's taken place from this point, it's all nullified. We're not going to have any more of that stupid prophecy that came before. And that all prophecy from this point on is going to happen coterminous with me speaking the words. Now, if it's happening coterminous, it isn't prophecy. It's a report of current events. Now, one of the problems that Ezekiel has is the same problem Daniel had. They can't get current events correct. Their presentation of current events is hugely flawed and filled with errors. But he's saying, if I say it, it's going to happen immediately, which means it's no longer going to be any prophecy. And he says that everything else that was said prophetically that was supposed to be fulfilled over a long period of time, that's nonsense. That all goes away. Satan's admitting. Yahweh does not allow him to maneuver in time so that he knows the future. So he cannot report in our past what will happen in our future because he doesn't know it. And therefore, he can't inspire prophecy. And therefore, a book like, or a statement like there's going to be a Magog war and a new temple, wrong. They would have had to have happened immediately, concurrent with the prophecy, in 500 BCE from them to meet the standard that Satan had set. So what we're witnessing in Ezekiel is the fulfillment of Yeshaya 14, of Satan seeking to be worshipped as if he were God. This should not be troubling, by the way, for our listeners, because we have all been through multiple times what Moshe had to say about false prophets. And one of the things that Moshe says about a false prophet is that if they don't speak in Yahweh's name, but mention the name of other gods, Adonai is the name of Adonis, another god, they are a false prophet. They're deadly. If anything they say of the past is inaccurate, they are a false prophet. They are deadly. If they get a single prediction of the future wrong, they're a false prophet and they are deadly. Daniel and Ezekiel fail both tests. They're both false prophets. And just because a book was placed between legitimate prophets shouldn't cause us to genuflect and say, "Oh, well, it must be true. Let's see what Yahweh had to say. They're using his name." Well, Satan knows Yahweh's name. So we have to be careful. We were given the tools to know what is of God and what is not. And it's our responsibility to use those tools as he gave them to us to make these determinations. And one of the determinations that is abundantly clear is Yahweh does not like being called the Lord. And there's a reason for that. Well, there's actually two reasons for that. The first is that Lord is exceedingly destructive of what he's trying to achieve with us. You cannot have a father-son, father-daughter relationship with Yahweh if you're referring to him as your Lord. We do not worship our fathers. Our fathers do not own us. They do not seek to control us. They do not want us to bow down to them, to kiss their rings, and to treat them. They are our master. That's what Baal, that's what Adonis, that's what Bel means. And so you cannot have a family relationship with Yahweh, which is what the covenant was conceived to achieve, if you're referring to Yahweh as Lord. Well, that's the primary reason. You guys know what the secondary reason is? That God despises being called the Lord?
Well,
what?
All right, I'll answer the question. Because my one of my very favorite guys made this exceedingly clear. His name is Elia. Elia not only beat the prophets of Baal, of the Lord, in debate, and did so with great humor and sarcasm, he killed them all afterwards. And that's how serious this is. This is life and death. The Lord is Satan's title. Yahweh describes Satan as Baal. He was the god of the Babylonians. In fact, Babel, which is the Hebrew name for Babylon, means Ba with Bel, the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of Babylon. That's why it means to confuse by commingling. The Lord is the name and title Yahweh used to describe Hasatan, the adversary, because the adversary seeks to be a lord. He wants to possess, to own, to control, to be the master, to be worshipped as the Lord of religion. So if you refer to Yahweh as the Lord, you're saying that he's Satan.
Right.
So those are the two reasons he despises it. So during this specific day, this is his return on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, October 2nd at sunset, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem in the year 2033. Yes, you heard that right. If you're a Jew, Maimonides' dating system isn't even close to being accurate, but nothing Maimonides said is accurate. During this specific day, it shall be, prophetically declares Yahweh, you will invite, welcome, and meet with me as an individual. Then you will never again call me my Lord. Ever again. For I will remove, accordingly, the names and reputations, the Shem, of the Balaam, the lords, from her mouth. They will not be remembered, recalled, or mentioned by their name ever again. Pretty clear enough.
Yes,
then
sir.
You will never again call me my Lord. Ever again. For I will remove accordingly the names and reputations of the Balaam, the lords, from her mouth, and they shall not be remembered, recalled, or mentioned by their name ever again. So when the Christian New Testament has the Lord Jesus Christ, sorry.
Oh.
It's a lie.
Well, just calling it the Bible.
Yes. To have a Bible means with the Lord.
Yeah.
Your Christian Bible, if you read it, even the Jewish Publication Society's Bible, read it. Every time Yahweh's name is mentioned, it replaces Yahweh's name with the Lord.
Yeah.
That angers God. 100% of people who do that have no relationship with him. They will not be there on the day of reconciliations. So the day of Yahweh's return, when all of this will occur, Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, is the concluding date of what I would refer to as the Great Intermission. Since shortly after David's death, and Israel began to disintegrate under his son Solomon, because his son Solomon was religious and brought in all manner of pagan gods and goddesses, that Yahweh has gradually started disassociating from them. The book of Hosea is the announcement of the divorce and the disassociation. You are no longer my children. You and I no longer have a relationship. It was a very, very long intermission. You know, Hosea is written in the 8th century BCE. That intermission is ongoing. It will not end until the days and months prior to his return with Dowd on Yom Kippurim in 2033. your 6,000 Yah. Yehudim on that day will be reunited with Yahweh, and they will call out to him by name, welcoming God back into their lives by his proper designation. It's one of the things that people don't have an appreciation of. They're quick to label people anti-Semites, but anti-Semite is based on Shem. Shem means name. That's all Shem means, is name. So they're anti the name. The folks who are the most anti-Semitic, the most against the name, which happens to be Yahweh, are religious Jews. There is no one more against Yahweh's name being used, being spoken, than the rabbis. Second onto them would be Christians, particularly Roman Catholics, who've outlawed it. And next, of course, would be Muslims who prefer Allah. There are many profound insights. Go ahead.
I was just curious what was really the difference between, say, Adonai and Bailey, just for the sake of the record and understanding the differences, or if there are any.
Adonai is it means the Lord. It's actually a corruption of a Hebrew term. The Hebrew term used in the Torah is actually Edom. And Edom in the Torah means upright pillar. It's used to describe the pillar that would sit in the center of the tent of the witness and to hold it up. The taller and stronger the upright pillar in the midst of the tent of the witness, the larger and more secure the home became. And it's Edom, and it is used that way. It's written exactly the same way, but corrupted to my Lord. Edom, yeah. It capitalizes on the Greek. And during the Maccabean period, which was allegedly to fight off Greek influence, no, it's exactly the opposite happened. If you look at if you look at the history of the province of Yehuda, or what happened to the Jews that were living in Alexandria, they became exceedingly Greek. And Adonis is one of the principal gods of Greek, and Adonis is based on Adonai. So that's the evolution of it, but both terms mean my Lord and Master. It's exactly what Yahweh says.
Thank you for clarifying.
And the reason he says they'll never call me by that name ever again, by their name ever again, and uses Balaam plural, is because there are lots of different words used to say my Lord. And God's disgusted by it. He has a name. His name is important. If you do not know his name, you do not know him. So the first of many important insights that are associated with this declaration is that Yahweh used Qara, which means to invite and welcome, to meet and greet, twice in reference to this day, letting us know that he is speaking of the Mikra. Mikra means to ponder the implications of this invitation, or Mikre, which is the plural of Yom Kippurim. This is the most important day on Yahweh's 7 millennium calendar. I'm not a wayward Jew. So the second chance of Yom Kippurim would normally not be essential to me. The promises that Yahweh made to me and to all of the children of Yisrael and to Yehudim were made through the covenant, where there are 5 specific benefits, and those benefits are all fulfilled through the first 4 Mikre, all of which were fulfilled during year 4000 Yah, which was 33 CE. Pesach, Matzah, Bokurim, and Shabuah, where we are given life eternal, we are perfected, we're adopted into Yahweh's family, and then we are enriched and empowered. Kippurim is the second chance for currently wayward Jews. And it is essential now to our lives because Yahweh was unable to find a single Jew who was willing to take his name, his words, seriously, and would devote the time to conveying what he said in the lingua franca of the world, which is in English. More Jews speak English than any other language. And we have devoted now 21 years of our lives, 6 and 7 days a week, 8, 10, 12 hours a day to this mission. And so our target audience is Yahweh's target audience. He's coming back on Yom Kippurim. He wants to celebrate a reconciliation with his family. And yet if you look around Yisrael, there are likely less than 5 of 7 million people who use Yahweh's name. So we have a long way to go before this reunion with Yahweh is going to be acceptable. And so Yom Kippurim means something to us, even though we've already received all of the benefits. We proclaim it because it is the most important day on Yahweh's calendar. This is the day that he gets to celebrate the return of his family.
Yep.
And he used Qara twice in this statement to convey that to us. Second, in terms of important prophetic declarations, on the day of reconciliations in year 6000 Yah, those who have been adopted into the covenant will be immortal, perfected, enriched, empowered, such that to the extent that we will relate to Yahweh as an individual rather than as God, these benefits will be things that we enjoy. So we know that because of the preceding Mikra, we are blessed with the benefits of the covenant. We're immortal, we're perfected, we're enriched, and we're empowered such that we are adopted into Yahweh's family. Affirming this in Yirmiyah 31, which is as important as anything that God's prophets ever revealed. Yahweh tells us that he is placing his Torah guidance within us, and this will enable us to know and understand so much more than our current comprehension and our current perspective will allow. Also, Yahweh will be energizing us, transforming our frail and feeble, three-dimensional material existence into seven-dimensional spiritual beings. Candlelight. One of the nice things about recognizing that Ezekiel is a fraud is you no longer have to deal with what is essentially a counterproductive notion of the valley of the dry bones. Physical resurrection is exceedingly counterproductive. It's the reason why the Christian myth that man killed God. Well, not man, Jews, even though I guess the Jews were the real Romans. You know, I guess it was a conspiracy prior to black Hebrew Israelites, since the Jews were really the practitioners of crucifixion, and were really the ones that tried him, and the Jews killed Jesus. Well, the very fact that the absurdity of God dying and of worshiping him as a dead God on a stick. The claim was that he was bodily resurrected. Well, that would be incredibly counterproductive. Not only would it violate Passover, and therefore his sacrifice have served no purpose because the sacrificial lamb, whatever's left of it, is incinerated that night. There is nothing but bad that comes from a bodily resurrection. I mean,
don't want it.
It's not feasible, and it isn't beneficial. You can't be immortal. You can't go to heaven. You can't maneuver outside of the world that we know. The nearest star or galaxy is beyond your reach. You could never get there, much less 100 billion light years across to go see the furthest galaxies, but no entrance to heaven, nothing, if you're burdened by a physical body. That is a step backwards. That's what one of the advantages of recognizing that Ezekiel is false, is you don't have to deal with the valley of the dry bones. There is no bodily resurrection. We're going to be empowered by God is taking us from being three-dimensional beings, stuck as we are in time, to being a seven-dimensional being like himself, which means that you could travel across the entire universe in the blink of an eye. You would have the ability to see the minute structure of the atom and then go off and explore the big scale of a spiral galaxy. And because energy and matter are transferable, you can, even though energy is much greater than matter, you can diminish an aspect of yourself and appear as a material being if you wish to enjoy an ordinary flow of time, if you wish to enjoy the taste of food, the sound of music, the feel of a sun against your skin, the feel of a cool spring around your feet. These things are possible when you transition from energy-based to material, which is possible, as it is possible then to go from physical and material back to energy. These things will all be possible for us, and it is what God means when he says he's going to enrich us and empower us on this day. Third, by using iysh, it's one of the most interesting words. God very often refers to himself by using iysh. When he visited with Abraham, he described himself as an iysh. Iysh is a term that can mean man or it just means individual. It's a person or a persona, that God has a personality. He has personal characteristics that make him special, make him unique. And so when Yahweh uses it, he's not saying that he is a man. He's saying that we'll be able to relate to him as a distinct individual and appreciate his unique and special personality. It's marvelous to be able to do that. The divorce will be over because iysh can also be translated as husband. Now, fourth, in terms of insights, upon Yahweh's return, and once he has reconciled his relationship with his people, in the first act of forever, Yahweh is going to prohibit the use and the name and title, the Lord. It will become the L word of eternity, never to be spoken by anyone, not even in jest. So we can speak it now, as you know, Yahweh uses the name of false gods all the time to tell us false gods are false gods. We can use it now and renouncing it, but soon there will not even be the opportunity to renounce it. It'll just be unknown. We can call Yahweh Yahweh, Yah, Yahweh, Dad, Father, Dad. But we will not call him Lord. Oh, that's pretty amazing. The single most common name, the ubiquitous title for the gods of religion, Lord, will never be spoken again because Yahweh hates it. This means that nothing irritates Yahweh more than this religious designation.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty profound for a blasphemy goat. And you know, I would not have thought that a goat would have the wherewithal to blaspheme, but nonetheless. Should you wonder, why this is the case. Why is it that Yahweh hates the term, again, Lord? Is because Lord's control, and Yahweh is the liberator. What did he say about us? Well, I'm using us because I'm about as Yisraelite as they come, even though my genes say scream goy. What did he say about us when we were in Mitzrayim and the crucibles of religious and political oppression, which is what Mitzrayim means?
Yeah.
Right.
His goal was to liberate us, to free us.
Yeah.
What's the first statement that he wrote in stone? My name is Yahweh. I was the one who liberated you, who freed you from being slaves. God is a great liberator, Lord's control. So it's the antithesis of Yahweh's relationship. One of the things that's so spectacular about being in a relationship with Yahweh is that we are liberated. We're freed. He doesn't ask us to obey him. He doesn't ask us to worship him. He doesn't ask us to bow down before him. His goal is to lift us up and to liberate us, to provide opportunities, not restrictions.
Well put.
Yahweh is our Father and lords are owners. Yahweh gives while lords possess. Lords are feared where Yahweh wants to earn our respect. And lords are modeled after the covetous and controlling, the worst of men.
Yes.
What a statement.
And this great celebration of reconciliation, the thing that Yahweh cherishes the most is never being called Lord again. That means that the rabbis, the priests, the pastors, who scratched out his name from his testimony 7,000 times, replacing Yahweh with the Lord, have done nothing but antagonize God to the point of exasperation. One of the most popular Bible translations is the New American Standard. I have a copy of it in front of me here. Reading from their preface, we find that it concludes with these words. And when I'm reading these words, please understand, I am reading what these nincompoops wrote. What they wrote was wrong. So what you're going to hear is indeed blasphemy. But they nonetheless wrote it. The proper name for God to professing Christians, whether of conservative or liberal persuasion, the name of God is most significant, and understandably so. It is inconceivable to think of spiritual matters without a proper designation for the supreme deity. Thus, the most common name for deity is God, a translation of the original Elohim. End quote. That's not true. God, like Elohim, is a word. It is not a proper name, which is why it is translated and not transliterated. If it were a name, the name would be Elohim. But it's
a descriptive noun.
It is simply a noun. And as a noun, we translate it, and the English word that we have translated into is God. Simple as that. They lied.
Yes.
So the source of your translation lied. The preface continues. And by the way, they know they lied.
Yeah.
The preface continues.
How
The normal word for master is Lord, a rendering of Adonai. Now, this is designed to purposefully mislead. based upon what follows. First, Adonai is a common title and not a distinct name. To the extent the title was considered a name, it is directed at the Greek god Adonis. Second, Adonai does not mean master. It does not mean Lord. Adon would mean that. It means my master or my Lord controls and possesses me. Third, Yahweh just said that the select few who are reconciled in the end will never even consider using Lord in reference to him. And fourth, Yahweh has but one name, and it is not Adonai. Now, since the New American Standard Bible translated Hosea 2:17, they knew what they were writing was offensive to God, but beneficial to their pocketbooks. Therefore, the New American Standard Bible's editors were lying when they wrote, "There is yet another name, which is particularly assigned to God as his special or proper name. That is the four letters YHWH. See Exodus 3 and Isaiah 42:8. This name has not been pronounced by the Jews because of reverence for the great sacredness of the divine name. Therefore, it was constantly pronounced and translated Lord."
That's the reason.
This is also a lie. It's a blatant lie.
Of course.
Yahweh was replaced by the title Lord. Yahweh was never pronounced or translated Lord, ever. Yod-He-Wah-He is easily pronounced. Those four letters are three vowels. You can look at any one of the hundreds upon hundreds, thousands of words in the Hebrew lexicon. It'll take you 15 minutes to validate that the Y is pronounced like the English. Yes, it is a consonant vowel, just as it is in English. And you speak of Isaiah, it's Yashayah, the Y. When Yahweh introduced himself to Moshe, he used H-Y-H, Haya.
Mm-hmm.
He tells you exactly how to pronounce Yahweh's name. When he introduces his name, he says it's based upon the verb Haya, which means I am, I exist, I was, I will be, and I am. Haya. Torah is another great example. Torah has the O sound in Torah, and the Ah sound in Torah are from the Wa and the He.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This is not difficult. Shalom, one of the most commonly pronounced Hebrew words. The O sound in Shalom is from the Wa. This is not
Same
difficult.
with Yom. Yep.
The editors of the New American Standard Bible lied.
Yep.
A translation by definition conveys the meaning of a word from one language to its equivalent in another. Yahweh does not mean Lord. It means I am, I exist, I was, I am, I will be. Moreover, names, unlike words, should be transliterated, replacing their pronunciation rather than translated. Osama bin Laden is Osama bin Laden, no matter if you're speaking French or English or German. Yahweh is Yahweh, no matter the language. You transliterate it using the alphabet of the other language. Therefore, Yahweh is Yahweh in every language on earth. No exceptions. And yet, those prostrating themselves as religious whores, accepting money for a pretense would have you believe, quote, the only exception to this translation of YHWH is when it occurs in immediate proximity to the word Lord, that is, Adonai. In that case, it is regularly translated God in order to avoid confusion. You know, if you read Ezekiel in an English Bible, including the Jewish Publication Society, it is always my Lord God. Now, what's really interesting in that, of course, is that my Lord is put in Yahweh's voice countless times. So they have Yahweh calling himself my Lord. And it actually says Adonai Yahweh. And so rather than just looking stupid and writing my Lord Yahweh, his name, and calling himself my Lord, they change it to my Lord God. And that's what they're doing here. They're justifying their translation of the book of Ezekiel, since it makes no sense. So this was done to avoid making the New American Standard translators look like ignoramuses, rendering Adonai Yahweh, actually Edon Yahweh, as Lord, Lord. They would only serve to reveal their duplicitous fraud. The New American Standard theologians conclude with this parting salvo. This is known that for many years, YHWH has been transliterated Yahweh. To no complete certainty attaches to the pronunciation. It isn't Yahweh. However, it is felt by many who are in touch with the laity of our churches that this name conveys no religious or spiritual overtones. It is strange, it is uncommon, and without significant religious and devotional background. No matter of scholarly debate can overcome this deficiency. Hence, it is decided to avoid the use of this name in the translation proper. Go to hell.
They got nothing religious.
Yeah, just go to hell. If I get to play a role in your judgment, I'm going to send you there.
Yeah.
What you have done, what you've contributed to, is inexcusable. It is an unforgivable sin. In fact, if you hadn't done this and you had actually read the third statement that Yahweh etched in stone, you would know that the diminishment, the devaluing of his name in this way was unforgivable and remains unforgivable. It's the only unforgivable sin to do precisely what they have done.
Yeah.
But at least scholars here they got one thing right. Yahweh's name conveys no religious overtones. That is true.
Yeah.
His name is strange and uncommon to the ears of most people because of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic editors. No scholarly debate between men can overcome this deficiency. Now, if you own a New International Version translation, don't gloat. It says, in regard to the divine name YHWH, commonly referred to as the Tetragrammaton, the translators adopted the device used in most English versions of rendering that name as Lord in all capital letters to distinguish from Adonai, another Hebrew word rendered Lord, for which small letters are used. That was so considerate of them. Fortunately, Yahweh has a plan in place to resolve this problem. Not that religious people will like it very much, because he will incinerate all of them who survived his return. Open a King James Bible and weep. The most popular of all translation reads, King James, who, by the way, was King Iams. There was no J at the time, no J sound at the time that he was king. He was actually King Iams. King Iams' version, in all caps, to the Most High and Mighty Prince James. Do you know those nincompoops actually renamed Jacob, the book in the Christian New Testament, to James to flatter this English king, who was actually Scottish, I believe. So
right.
That, by the way, to introduce it as to the Most High and Mighty Prince James is sufficient to burn the book. It would be King James' version, not Yahweh's. King James, coveting a divine sanction to rule, had his supporters right. Great and manifold were the blessings, most dread sovereign, which Almighty God, the Father of all mercies, bestowed upon the people of England, when first he sent your Majesty's royal person to rule and reign over us. Yes, God, the God who says that human governments are obnoxious. They are a sign that people have rejected me. And you want to claim that this was a favor to England when he first sent your Majesty's royal person to rule and reign over us? Boy, you would be lost. Haven't they read Shamuel? It makes it abundantly clear that to choose a king is to reject Yahweh. Yahweh was regulated to a lowercase he. Well, James was promoted to a parade of capitals in designating deity. The KJV was for him, after all. The dark spirit behind this politically inspired religious twist is revealed in the next line. Boy, I'm going to probably get another hate letter from Kristen if I keep this up. Because they want to say whether King James was authorized.
Authorized by God.
Inerrant word of God. Yeah, of course.
Inerrant, yeah. And
the first version of it, there wasn't even a Jesus to be found because there was no J. And the first version actually said, "Thou shalt commit adultery."
I know. I've seen that one. I've seen that.
Yes.
He sure did.
Yes. For whereas it was the exception of many who wished not well unto our Zion is King James, that the setting of that bright occidental star against, now we're talking about Queen Elizabeth, of most happy memory, some think, and palatable clouds of darkness would have overshadowed this land, that men should have been in doubt which way they were to walk, and that it should be hardly known who was to direct the unsettled state. The appearance of your Majesty as the Sun, capital S-U-N, and his strength instantly dispelled those supposed and surmised myths, and gave unto all that were well effective exceeding cause of comfort, especially when we beheld the government established by your highness, your hopeful seed, by undoubted title.
Wow.
Yeah.
3 terms were capitalized and italicized: Sion, referencing James; occidental star, as the sun, as it is the brightest star which sets in the west. The reference to Elizabeth is revealing. Her principal viceroy, John D., was an occultist, and her only official portrait, the queen, is clothed in sun god images. Their devotion to the sun becomes even more blatant when we read that James' appearance was as the sun, and the reason Sion, occidental star, and sun are capitalized is they represent the Christian deity. Yahweh's testimony was plastered over and whitewashed by politically and religiously inspired clerics, the arrogance of a repulsive man who thought himself representing the sun. The primary Bible of the Protestant Church was corrupted to empower and enrich clerics and kings. Putting in a plug for themselves and their bosses, the scholars who crafted this beguiling propaganda, falsely attributing it to God by cleric and king, wrote that all will be blessed by religious and learned discourse, and by cherishing the teachers thereof, by caring for the church as a most tender and loving nursing father. Of course, there isn't even a mention of a church in the Christian New Testament. You know, when you Christians read church there, the word ecclesia means called out. It has no bearing whatsoever to church. It can't be transliterated church. It can't be translated church. Church is just a made-up word based upon the Greek, the German goddess Circe, which means circle and circuit, and was the daughter of the sun. Of course, the father in this case was James in this context, not Yahowah, and men's teachings aren't to be cherished. Moreover, church was derived from the name of a pagan sun goddess. The fourth paragraph of the King James preference begins, there are infinite arguments of this right Christian and religious affection for your majesty. James, of course, not Yahowah. But none is more forcible to declare it than to others than the vehement and perpetrated desire of accomplishing and publishing this work which we are now humbly present unto your majesty. It is the synthesis of religion, a politically enabling tool designed to control men, both men and women. The following paragraph even takes a jab at the political and religious competition, saying, so if we shall be traduced, means defamed, spoken maliciously of, slandered by this goat perhaps, by popish persons at home and abroad, who therefore will malign us because we are poor instruments to make God's holy truth to be yet more known. This was no longer Yahowah versus Baal. It was one man's religion against another. So the lords of England, who saw themselves as masters and owners of the realm, saw fit to apply their title to God, calling Yahowah Lord, and 4 centuries later, most remain mired in their mess. The key to transitioning the open door to eternal life is recognizing the difference between God's words and those of men. Yahweh's name and that of the Lord. Hosea has stated God's position on this matter for all who would listen. Pretty breathtaking, is it not?
Yeah. I like the pictographs at the end, too.
Yeah.
Now, before we
commence... That you wrote this before you even knew about Ezekiel.
Oh, yes.
And it's the perfect antidote to Ezekiel.
Yeah, it is.
Incredible.
It's kind of nice that we're reviewing this. Hosea was the first book that I translated now 21 years ago. Wasn't very good at it at the time, but yet I was able to create a translation that was vastly more accurate and complete than anything that was available. And
right.
just feasted on what we were learning in Hosea and how vehemently anti-religious God is. And that really is the theme of Hosea. God despises religion, and he divorced the Jewish people because they wanted to be religious. And he was going to be around their false gods and false testimony and their religious nature. And so they had this long intermission, one that God is going to reconcile upon his return with a remnant of Israelites and Yehudim. And we have subsequently retranslated Hosea many, many times. The last was about a year ago, and it appears, I believe it's the 8th volume of the Yada Yahowah series. And in the final rewrite, this chapter really became alive. Everything Hosea had to say resonated and reinforced and affirmed so much of what we have learned. And it's true, though, when I did my last translation of this, I had not come to the conclusion that Daniel and Ezekiel were spurious. One of the things that should have been clues to me is that it was essentially impossible to include anything in Daniel or Hosea, Daniel or Ezekiel, in any of the volumes that I had written thus far. I mean, I'd written 15,000 pages of translations and commentary, and other than a snippet or two out of Daniel 9, there was nothing. And I remember constantly saying, I'm not willing to commit as to whether there are going to be 2 wars or 1 war during the last days. Ezekiel would have the Magog War, and everyone else speaks of a war around Jerusalem. And so I'm just saying I'm not going to commit until I actually have the opportunity to translate Ezekiel from beginning to end. And I'm not even halfway to that portion of Ezekiel, but it is infinitely obvious. It's undeniable that Ezekiel is a complete fraud. And so there will be no Magog War, and so that ends the debate. But at the time that I did this final translation, I had no reason to question either book, other than I knew the first 6 chapters of Daniel were rubbish, and they're political, they're religious, they're just disgusting, and that Ezekiel's visions of his God were whacked out and crazy. I didn't know that until quite recently that they're actually satanic, but they are. Yeah. So we're now on Hosea. Before we press on beyond Hosea 2:17, I'd like to share kind of where we have been in the 2nd chapter. So this will be a review for those who have listened over the past weeks. Say to your brothers, it begins, my people, and to your sisters, she could have loved and been kind. Rebuke quarreling and contending with your mother. Prosecute, filing a complaint, for she is not my woman or wife, neither am I her man or husband. Let her therefore turn away from her illicit and illegitimate relationships, her idolatry and whoring, such that they are away from her presence, with her unfaithfulness from the way she perceives her breasts. Otherwise, I will strip her naked, exposing her. I will present her as the day she was born, causing her to be akin to a lifeless and barren place of questionable words. I will make her similar to the parched earth, such that she dies of thirst. God is telling us, and as clearly as he can, is using Hosea as an example, asking him to marry a temple prostitute. that the women of Yisrael, the women of Yahudah, are whoring around with their religion, and that God sees them as prostitutes and whores because of their religion. And even though women are demeaned by Judaism, he's saying, nonetheless, they're acting like whores. They're renting out their wombs and under the pretense of love. And so with regard to her children, I will be neither loving nor compassionate, neither merciful nor kind, because they are children of their religious infidelity, their feigned love, and of seeking to profit by being disingenuous. It should be obvious that their mother is unfaithful and acts like a religious prostitute. She who conceived them should be ashamed. She should be humiliated for acting inappropriately. This is because she conveyed her intent, saying to herself, I have chosen to continually go after what I desire from my closest and most intimate relationships, which provide my bread, my water, my wool, my linen, my olive oil, and my drink. In other words, religious Jewish women are renting their womb for comforts, for temporal things. Likewise, in response, behold, I will guard to restrain and block, hedging up that which is associated with your path with thorns. I will erect a stone to block your progress, so that her way of life will be incapable of discovering it. So she will pursue and annoy her most intimate lovers and passionate desires, but she will not achieve what she is chasing after. She shall seek them and will conspire with them, but she will not prevail, nor be satisfied by what she craves. Then she will say, I will go after and I will go in reverse course, returning to my initial husband and former man, because it was better, more productive, and beneficial for me than it is now. But she did not acknowledge or even care that I gave to her, providing for her the grain, the new wine, and olive oil, in addition to having greatly increased her silver and gold, which they assigned to Baal, the Lord. Therefore, when I return, I will grasp hold of my grain, which is symbolic of saved souls, which will be increasing and growing for having observed his banner at this proper time, along with my new wine, which is symbolic of being perfected and being given eternal life as an inheritance, as part of his continuing witness to the appointed meetings. Then I will rescue and defend, indeed save, by delivering my wool, which is to cover us so that we appear perfect in Yahweh's eyes, and my linen to cover and conceal her nakedness. However, at this time, right now, I am revealing that which is associated with her stupidity and her foolishness, her lewdness and shame, in the sight of her most intimate lovers and passionate desires. No individual can save her out of my hand. Then I will observe the Shabbat by causing a cessation of all of her merry celebrations, her festival feasts, her new moon observances, and her approach to the Shabbat, and to all of her designated celebrations. You know, it's interesting that in the book of Ezekiel, 4 of Yahweh's Moed Mikre are replaced, including the most important one for Jews today, the second chance, Yom Kippur. But replacing them, the Ezekiel speaks of new moon observances and a special Shabbat observance. It's an annual celebration. And God is saying, no, those things are yours. As a matter of fact, the way that religious Jews observe the Shabbat has no bearing whatsoever on what Yahowah instructed. It is an entirely religiously orchestrated, overbearing, onerous approach to making a day miserable and unproductive. And I will abandon her vines and her fig tree wherever she has said, these gratuities are for me because my sexual partners and lovers have given them to me. However, I will cause them to be a thicket of tangled underbrush, and the animals of the land shall devour them. Does not like religion. And all through this, the sexuality of this, the whorishness nature of this, the prostitute references, the references to adultery are all directed at religious behavior. I will take inventory and record against her for the time and association with Balaam, the lords, who seek to be perceived as masters, to possess and to control, because she blew smoke and burned incense and made offerings to them. Now, that should be proof. If your mind is open and your head is in the game, that all of these references to her being a prostitute, to Israel being a whore, God being disgusted by this behavior, and then God describes the behavior. I will take inventory and record against her for the time and association with Balaam, the lords. Religious behavior for those who seek to be perceived as masters, to possess and to control, because she blew smoke, burned incense, and made offerings to them. She was religious, which made her a prostitute from God's eyes. And she was adorned, plain religious dress-up, with her ornamental rings and circular objects. Bejeweled, she went after her lovers, pursuing her desires and illicit relationships with the lords, with false gods. And she ignored and then forgot me, prophetically announces Yahowah. It's true. Religious Jews have completely forgotten about Yahowah. They won't mention his name. They won't write his name. They don't understand his name. Not that his name is sacred to them. It's they hate it. They've written it out of their lives. And by the way, their great hatred of Yahweh's name was solidified in Babylon, because the exiles in Babylon were called Yahoos by the Babylonians, who spoke a variation of Hebrew called Aramaic. And they called them Yahoos. And rather than correct them and say, no, it's Yahud, it means beloved of Yah, and Babylonians wouldn't have cared. I mean, one more god, amongst the hundreds would have been insignificant and meaningless to them. And the very fact that they were named after this god, Yahowah, they would have giggled at anyway, because, well, they had taken every bit of the temple with them.
Chosen away, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the reason that Yahowah hates being called the Lord, the reason that he hates religious behavior, is because the religious ignore and then forget about him, is what is being prophetically announced by Yahowah. So any religion that does not announce Yahweh's name, who writes his name out of their religion, as have Christians, as evidenced by the forward to those 3 Bible translations that I read. Mm-hmm. As Jews, read the Jewish Publication Society Tanakh. Read anything the rabbis have written in the Babylonian Talmud, and you will find that they have ignored and then forgotten Yahowah. Therefore, by contrast, long thereafter, behold, knowing that she has been deceived I will leave the way open to persuade her, should she become open-minded. Yahweh is giving you a second chance. Yom Kippurim. Don't blow it. At that moment, I will walk with her to ponder the word, even in the place where these statements are questioned, such that I speak words to her heart, making an impression upon her judgment and thinking. Beginning then and there, I am prepared to give her so that she can approach her vineyards and vine dresser, the garden and resulting fruit. In the valley of Achor troubles, it's going to become an open doorway. The doorway of hope, of confidently expectful future, a means to be optimistic and move forward. And what is the catalyst for this great change? Recognizing Yahweh's name.
Yahweh's name.
Then and there, along with the name, she will respond with the answer, as in the days of her youth, as in the day when, lifted up, she ascended out of the land of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious oppression. Following Pesach, the doorway to life, on Matzah, the day that we are perfected, when the stench of the Mitzrayim religion and politics were removed from the people, and Yahweh freed them. That is the day, Pesach, Matzah of Bakurim, becoming the children of Israel, adopted into Yahweh's covenant family. During this specific day, it shall be, prophetically declares Yahweh, you will invite, welcome, and meet with me as an individual. And then you will never call me, Baali, my Lord, ever again. For I will renounce, reject, and remove accordingly the names and reputations of the Baalim, the lords, from her mouth. And they shall not be remembered or recalled or mentioned by their name ever again. Hosea 2:1 through 2:17. The whores are the religious. The prostitutes are religious. Christians, Jews, Muslims. It doesn't matter. From God's perspective, they are all absolutely disgusting.
No, I haven't retranslated everything there, but I have done awful big chunks of it, especially in 17. There's nothing in this translation that is hard to understand, and it's nothing that's not there.
No.
I mean, it's not if you can read it, you can understand it. And if you understand it,
now there are, to be fair, a lot of references to disgusting, lewd behavior, to whores and prostitutes and adultery.
But metaphors, still metaphors.
And plain religious dress up. Yeah. But those are all explained as you read it, where God says your adultery, your whoredom, is because you chased after the lords.
Yeah.
You've given the lords, the false gods, the things that I gave you.
I gave you. Yeah.
And because you've been religious, I can't do anything for you. I can't do anything for your children. And because you're religious, I have to block the way to heaven. Because I don't want to spend an eternity with you. I don't even want to be around you now. That's why the long intermission. But it's for darn sure we're not going to spend eternity together. So I will absolutely block the way for you to find me while you are religious. And it's only after you cease to be religious, when you come to value my name again and accept me as who I am, as an individual, stop listening to these self-serving prostitute of rabbis, that we'll be together again. But if your mind's open, you're willing to walk away from religion and walk to God as He has conveyed his nature to us along the path he has provided. The door is open. We wrote these 25 volumes and made them available to you. YadaYah.com. All of them are available. They're all available free. Read them. Benefit from those translations. Benefit from the commentary and the insights. Validate whatever is written. It's every translation was written including the Hebrew root. You're reading them online, super easy. Make a copy and paste of, for example, the next line is, then I will cut. Cut. Karat. Wa is then, I will cut. Karat. I will establish through separation at that moment, written in the call perfect. For them, lahem, so that they can approach a family-oriented covenant relationship, berith. In that day, ba-ha-yom, in conjunction with other living things of the garden environs and in harmony with the winged creatures of the spiritual realm, even the creatures that move about of the earth. And so then I will establish and destroy the bow, including the weapons which make life difficult, and the sword, including that which severs and separates, lacerates and devastates, along with war, hostility, and infighting from the earth, so that I can make it possible for them to relax confidently and securely. Every one of those words you can look up. You can do, Kirk, as you have done, as Dee, as you have done. Validate them for yourself. Dee not long ago decided that, I'm going to check out the whole timeline because I'm pretty forthright. I'm telling you, the day that Yah was returning, sunset, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem, October 2nd, 2033 is year 6,000 Yah and the dawning of the day of reconciliations. I've done this because we've translated Yahweh's words and compared what he has said to everything else he has conveyed, and it becomes obvious. Validate it for yourself. See if it's true. So, Dee created a timeline that goes all the way back to the very beginning and found out that after months and months and months and months of work, it all works out exactly as we have stated.
Yes.
This is the time you have left. This is the offer that God is making. Go ahead, Dee.
Oh, it's mathematically precise, and it's all there. Anyone can find this. Anyone. Very easily. You just have to think a little bit.
Yeah, I think it helps to know who Yahweh is and what he is offering, to put together all of the details of his life. And, of course, shining, shimmeringly brilliant, the most brilliant human who's ever lived, God's favorite person, his announced son, our Messiah, the King of Kings, Dode, is right in the middle of the story. So perfectly placed.
Well timed, eh?
Yeah, and it's exactly 40 Yobel since we were escorted out of the garden for corrupting the Word of God, the very thing the religious would do. To the time that the agreement was made to allow us back in with Abraham and the fulfillment of the covenant in year 2000 Yah, exactly 40 Yobel. Yobel is 50 years. It's a time of forgiving debts, returning the land, and of restoring the relationship while freeing all slaves. So it's a time of emancipation, freedom, of forgiveness of all debts, and of returning to the place that Yah was offering. That's every 50 years is a Yobel. 40 is the number of a time of completion of a time of testing. Rain 40 days and 40 nights. The Exodus was 40 years. Everything is in multiples of these things. And 40 Yobel from the time that Adam and Chava were expelled from the garden for corrupting Yahweh's testimony to the time that the covenant was affirmed on Mount Moriah with Yahweh providing the lamb. 40 Yobel makes it 2000 Yah, 1968 BCE. 40 Yobel thereafter is 33 CE. That is the time the first four Moed Mikre were fulfilled, Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, and Shavuot. Religious Jews don't know this because Judaism was created to deny the false notion that Jesus was the Messiah and Son of God, and therefore they couldn't tolerate the notion that there really was a person named Yosha, and that Yosha is Yahweh saving us, and that he did so by fulfilling, as he had promised to Abraham, Passover. And having rejected that notion in the formation of Judaism, they would go on to reject the fulfillment of matzah, eliminating it even from the annual celebration, as well as Bakodim and Shavuot. But they were all fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, so that we could be made immortal, perfected, adopted into Yahweh's covenant family, enriched and empowered, giving us the opportunity to Towrah, which is a yet unfulfilled mikre. In a sense, one sense it is being fulfilled in your hearing. I was called to serve as Yahweh's witness in this regard on Towrah, what will be 32 years prior to his return. And Towrah is what we're all inspired to do, corrupted by the Rabbis to the Babylonian celebration of Rosh Hashanah. But Towrah is the time that we proclaim this warning, to share Yahweh's disgust for religion, to call people out of Babylon and to the covenant relationship. That is Towrah. Kippurim is the result. We do our job well, there will be many Yehudim and Yisraelites who will reconcile their relationship with Yahweh upon his return, as he returns with his son and Messiah, Dod. And we write, we speak, we do all that we do to encourage Yehudim to come home. Those who do will then find that 5 days later, you're celebrating on the Shabbat, a 1,000-year celebration of Sukkah, of camping out with God, where the earth is returned to the conditions that were found in Eden. And of course, it happens 40 Yobel, or 2,000 years from the fulfillment in 33 CE, year 4,000 Yah, bringing us to 2033. And Kippurim being fulfilled on October 2nd on our pagan calendars. That's the plan. That's the promise. That's the offer. And it's being made by Yahweh. Yep. So, folks, that's a full show for tonight. We can pick this up with Hosea 2:18. We'll repeat this, and I will cut. Such an interesting term, karat. We can examine why Yahweh used it to speak of the covenant relationship, and then why Yahweh used what is clearly references to a garden and this presentation of his reaffirmation of the covenant. And we'll come to appreciate why what he's speaking of is the restoration of our planet back to the conditions that were experienced in Eden, which is why we know so much about what took place there. That's where we're headed.
Can't
All right,
wait.
well, that's I'm sorry to have brought such sad news in terms of Yah's disgust for religion, but it is the most reoccurring theme throughout the prophets. It's something that he wants known, so we're going to tell it to you, even if labeled a goat, a blaspheming goat, nonetheless. It is what Yahweh wants known, and to blaspheme is to call him the Lord. To delight him is to call him by his name. and his name is Yahowah, and it is he whom we serve. Happy Shabbat to one and all. Look forward to being with you this time next week. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Kirk, and have a blessed Shabbat. Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, Kirk.
Bye-bye, Dee.